So it is Friday, June, I believe it's the 5th or the 6th. I can't remember. My days are all kind of blurry. But I've been really going and doing a lot of consulting work and moving and, just a ton of transition since leaving my job in marketing. And I decided today that I was only going to do things that I wanted to do, and I was just going to let the day unfold, which is part of walking the path and walking in truth. So right now I'm actually outside underneath the maple tree. I don't know if we could see that maple tree in front of my parents' house. And one of the things I did was actually, if you look in front of the house here, let's turn that around. There's actually a rose bush, and maybe we'll get a closer look of that a little bit later. But it tends to bloom twice a year, once in the springtime and once in the fall. And right now it's got these really lovely, I don't know if you could see this, these really lovely rose flowers. And if you're ever unsure if you're looking at rose, one way to tell is you can actually just look on the back here, and you'll see a 5-pointed star on the back by the stem, and you'll know, can you see that? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And basically anything in the rose family will have that 5-pointed star. So we're talking about roses such as this one, and I'm not sure what it is. It could just be a common rose. I'm not really sure exactly what species of rose. But cherry trees, they're part of the rose family. Apple trees, strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, they're all part of the rose family. And these are really good medicine. Anytime we're working with rose, we're really working with opening that heart center. And from a spiritual aspect, it's opening the heart center. It's helping to relieve emotional confusion, which I found rose is always very uplifting. We give it to our beloveds when they're sick. Rose is a yellow and an orange for friendship, red for our beloved on Valentine's Day, or when they're sick, they're not feeling well, for anniversaries. White, very purifying. So there's a whole culture and a folklore about rose and the different colors and the significance. And I just find it interesting because it ties in with rose's medicine so well in terms of opening up our emotional center, opening up our heart, clearing that emotional, confusion on an energetic and a spiritual level. And as we know, anytime we're dealing with something on a physical level, there's usually an energetic and spiritual component. If we're dealing with something on a energetic or spiritual level, an emotional level, it tends to come out in the body. And so we're not just one or the other, we're all of it. And on a very physical level, rose I find to be very astringent. And what we mean by that is, if you've ever had anything, you've tasted anything, or you can even put one of the rose petals in your mouth, it tends to suck all of that hydration, all that saliva, all of the mucus up. And with our gums, that's very good in terms of really tightening up the gums, tightening up the tissue, relieving a lot of that congestion and mucus, and really drying things up. It's great for skin. It gives us a really healthy glow as a rose toner, or infused with witch hazel. And it just really helps to tighten up the skin, tighten up the tissues, and really make it healthy and bring life back. One of my favorite ways to use rose is actually the dried flowers. I tend to get from, either, if I haven't dried them myself, I'll usually purchase the petals from mountain rose, and I'll crush up some of those in a baking soda and just use that as a tooth powder. Sometimes I'll even I've infused it in coconut oil, and then I've used the coconut oil on my skin and, on my teeth. And I have to admit that's not something that I've done in a while, but it's one of the practices that I want to get back into. It's very soothing, very self-nurturing, and it's great. It's great for the skin. It's great for our emotional well-being. Rose tea, I actually will prepare a few different ways. If I want it as a hot tea, I will usually boil up the water, and I'll put, I don't know if you could see this, but pretty much all of these petals, if I'm making it into an infusion, will probably go in either a gallon or a half-gallon jar once I've broken them up and I've seen exactly how many petals there are. And then I would pour some hot water over it, right in that mason jar, and cap it off. You want hot water that isn't quite boiling yet. And with flowers, and in this case rose, you don't want to scorch the flowers, otherwise they're going to become very bitter. So that's why we don't boil it. We don't usually boil it on the stove. We usually just pour that hot water right over it into the mason jar and let it steep for either a few hours or overnight. Last summer, I found that I really enjoyed rose just by filling up that quart or a half gallon or a gallon, whatever I had available, depending on the quantity of roses. And I just filled that up with cold water, and I capped it off, and I actually put it in the fridge for a few days just to do a cold infusion. And then when I was ready to drink it, either I left the flowers in there, just like you would make a natural vitamin water. You can absolutely eat these petals, or I would strain them off. And I actually found that I enjoyed the iced rose on a day-to-day basis. I found it very uplifting. I found it very nurturing, very comforting, and I also knew that it was helping my body. It was helping, relieve any kind of mucus in the tissues, helping to dry it up, helping to tighten it up. I've been dealing with some sinus issues lately, and I've been getting the call to work with rose again to help with that, and just drink it internally as a water, as a refreshing, summertime beverage. And I also like doing the cold infusions because it'll tinge the water pink just a little bit, depending on the kind of rose. And then if I strain off the flowers, if for that night or something I want an actual hot infusion, I already have that cold infusion prepared, and when I heat it up on the stove, it actually will change the properties of it, and you'll begin to see that it looks more like an actual tea, or what we come to know as an infusion. And I've actually found that that's a little bit more versatile for my needs, so that I can decide how I want that beverage and how I want to bring out those properties. And do I want it more astringent? Do I just want it a little bit more uplifting as a refreshing water? One of the other things that I like about rose is using it in a bath. You can absolutely take that infusion into the bath with you. If you have a half gallon, pour it into a nice bath. Or I've even just taken the flowers and I've crushed them up in the bath as the water was running. The one thing that I found to be the hardest to do with rose is to create an oil. There's a reason why rose oil is very expensive. It takes a long time to press out the essential oils out of the flower, and in my experience, it's one of the harder flowers to actually infuse in an olive oil or a sesame oil or an almond oil on its own. So I don't generally use the rose oil in that way. However, I have done it in the past where I've infused rose, one rose, in with a batch of lavender that I had created for a friend of mine and an herbal sister, and allowed that to be kind of like her magic uplifting oil that she could use every night. And it was more to get the energy of rose as opposed to actually getting the medicinal properties of rose out. If I am using rose in some kind of preparation other than a coconut oil. I have had success with it in a coconut oil, or an infusion, cold or hot. The other way I like to use rose is in a tincture. And in the past, I've used just 100% vodka, usually organic grain alcohol, and I've infused it, and I actually don't have it with me. This is kind of an impromptu discussion, but it turns it this bright pink color, and I find that very uplifting if I'm on a trip, or in the past if I've spoken to a crowd, or maybe that day I just haven't really taken care of myself as well as I should. Just a few drops of the rose tincture under the tongue, not even diluted, just straight out of the dropper bottle. I feel immediately this sense of any emotion that I may have taken on from other people in a meeting that day, or like I said, any more intense emotions that I may have experienced because maybe I wasn't taking care of myself as well as I should have that day. I immediately feel them disappear, and I feel my heart open, my head open, and it really does remove that cloud. So that's pretty much all I have to say about rose today. And maybe there'll be a follow-up video. I'm always learning new things about the plants, but I figured I'd share since I was out here gathering some sort of on an impromptu, and just have an impromptu conversation. So thank you.